Hi all. So welcome back to the business contractual relationship course, and today we are going to discuss about the consumer credit and consumer protection legislations in UK. With related to the Scottish law, we are going to consider about the consumer credit legislations as well as the consumer protection legislations. Right. So in this lesson, basically, we are expecting to deliver about an idea on the Consumer Credit Acts in 1974, as well as the implementations by the Consumer Protection Act of 1987, and some of the provisions and special facts made by the Financial Services and Markets Act of 2000 will be discussed here in this discussion. Right. So first we'll move to get to know about the Consumer Credit Act of 1974. So what is the Consumer Credit Act of 1974? Basically, by its name, it mentions like consumer credit that relates to the credits which are drawn by the consumer. So here in the Consumer Credit Act, we consider about the let's say the consumer credit types. Like there are three credit types, as you can see. The consumer credits can be loans, those can be hire purchases, or even can be the credit card purchases. Basically, the facilities of the credit cards. Now, hire purchases consisting of leasing facilities as well as the financing facilities of motor vehicles and things like that. So, to govern all these practices in a country, so they need the sort of legislative background, or let's say a framework. So that is why they have chosen Consumer Credit Act 1974, which has been initially established, or let's say which has been registered in the Parliament of the United Kingdom to govern all these practices, right? So the main focus of this Consumer Credit Act is to basically to regulate all these credit activities known as loan, hire purchases and the credit card purchases, as well as to facilitate the debtors protection, in the sense that in Consumer Credit Act, the act is merely focusing on implementing, or let's say regulating the backgrounds of consumer credit, as well as to give a sort of a protection. Now when it comes to the consumer protection acts, right, credit protection acts, there are various types of measures that they have been taken to let's say to protect the consumers or the creditors. But when it comes to this act also, you can see there's a possibility, or there are some sort of measurements that they have been taken in order to protect the debtors from their credits, right? So now areas covered by this act are the information consumers should be provided, like basically the information consumers should be provided with before they enter into a credit agreement. That is a requirement, right? So there are some possible requirements made by this act on the any sort of given consumer credit scenario. So when it comes to that, all the consumers known as the debtors, here in this case we'll call them as the debtors, right? The party who grants the loan is known as a creditor. The party who receives the loan is known as the debtor. So here we have to, like, let's suppose that we are the creditors. So as we being the creditors, we should provide the consumers, or let's say the debtors, about the information that whatever they require to know. So in that case, the information consumers should be provided with before they enter into the credit agreement. Now all the consumers are known as debtors. They should have to provide with the sufficient information about this credit agreement before they come into the contract, right? And also the content and the form of credit agreements. So what is the content of this credit agreement, as well as the form? It can be a loan, it can be a hire purchase, it can be a sort of a credit card, what do you call credit card arrangement. So whatever the arrangement, that has to be communicated to the debtor, right? And the method of calculating the annual percentage rates of interest, that is what we call as the APR. So all whatever the loans or whatever the hire purchases or whatever the credit card purchases whatever we made, so let's say the person who makes that transaction, let's say the debtor, has to pay an interest rate to the particular creditor in connection with the said purchase. right? So that is known as the APR, or in some cases when it comes to the savings and all, we call it as the ratio as the AER, that is annual effective rate. So when it comes to the credit agreements, we call it as the annual percentage rates, right? And also procedures relating to events of default, termination and early settlement. Now when it comes to the credits, we can say most of the people are trying to drag the credit liabilities, of course, right? Especially now, if you can see, during this coronavirus era, most of the people are not having the sufficient funds to pay over their liabilities. So because of that, all the liabilities are getting dragged, right? But rather dragging, some of the people are trying to mitigate the risk of let's say the risk of financing. So because of that, most of them are trying to terminate their contracts. In the sense, in some cases they try to early settle their contracts, and so on and so forth, right? So if there are some sort of, there should be some procedures. So on that procedures, the government, the creditors has to explain to their debtors on the procedures of early settlements, termination and default, right? In an event where the creditor is debtor is not having the sufficient funds to pay over their liabilities, so what will happen, right? What will be the legal actions which will be taken by the creditor, so on and so forth, they have to explain. And also credit advertising. So the credit advertisements, like all the credit advertisements, are governed by this Consumer Credit Act, right? And then additional protection to the credit card purchases costing more than GBP 100 and up to the GBP 30,000 under the Section 75 of the Consumer Credit Act. Now under the Consumer Credit Act, there is a special provision which is given as the protection provision to the people, especially the purchases which have been made by the people more than 100 GBP, and let's say it should be less than 30,000 GBPs, right? We'll move further, right? So what is the creditor's role as per the Act? Now there are two parties known as a creditor and debtor. So creditor is the person who provides the credit facility. So there is a role to be acted by the creditor. What is the role to be acted by the creditor? Creditor must assess the credit worthiness of the debtor prior granting the facility. Now before, let's suppose we are the creditors. If we are the creditors, we have to evaluate our debtor, or let's say the applied person for the credit facility, before we grant a loan, right? Because to see his credit worthiness or her credit worthiness, because we don't know whether he or she is going to pay the liability during the terms that we have decided over. So because of that, to know about the feasibility of recoveries, we should know about the credit worthiness, right? So we can check them with their credit history, right? By looking at their previous credit, let's say the liabilities that they are having. So we can get the information from some of the credit agencies in Sri Lanka. You may have heard of the term called CRIB, right? That is called Credit Information Bureau of Sri Lanka. So mostly the other countries, like basically when it comes to Scotland and England and South Wales, they are having separate credit information agencies, right? So from them, if you are the creditor, you can have the information about someone's credit history, right? So you have to pay a sum for that, right? And also the creditor should reveal the following information to the debtor. Now prior you coming to an agreement between the debtor and the creditor's liability is to provide some of the information or reveal some of the information to the debtor. So what are those? The nature of the agreement. I told you about, there are loans, there are lease agreements, there are credit card agreements. So you should reveal what the sort of facility is, right? And then the identity and address of the creditor, right? So creditor has to reveal their, when it comes to some of the credit agreements, they should have to reveal their official names, right? And also their licensed, or let's say the registered office, the location of that exact office, right? So these information are must to reveal in a contract or an agreement of a credit, right? And where applicable, the name of the address of the credit intermediary. Now there are some sort of, especially when it comes to the credit card cases, we can see some of the intermediary parties are involved with recovering, granting, right? These are the two ends, right? So whenever it comes to the bank is the person who actually provides the credit facility, and there's another facility called the third party, another party called a third party who governs that facility, or let's say who looks after the arrangements of that facility, right? Who gets the recoveries from the consumer. Likewise, there are some sort of credit intermediaries. So if somebody going to get involved with this credit agreement, so that has to be mentioned in the credit agreement as well, right? Because in an event of a recovery, consumer won't know about the intermediary who is going to involve this agreement, right? So because of that, it has to be mentioned in the agreement expressly. Then the type of the credit, right? What type of it is it? Then the amount of the credit or the credit limit, right? Some of the people are there, without having sufficient information. Some of the people, now when it comes to the, especially in the settlements, right? Whenever the overdue settlements, we can see most of the people are not known to the facility amount, right? Some of the people are telling that, okay, I thought this facility is around this much, right? So that is why I've chosen, the card for my transactions. I didn't know that the facility has already been, what do you mean, like the facility that I've rendered is overdue, right? Likewise, there are so many complaints. So because of that, it's a must. Now, without having sufficient knowledge, it's a different matter, right? So giving the sufficient knowledge is a different matter. So it's creditor's liability to give a sufficient knowledge to his client about the credit limit and the amount, right? And the duration of the agreement, right? How far is it go? Like, what is the duration or total time of the agreement? The rate, as I told you, what is the APR, right? And what are the other conditions? Like I said, whenever it comes to the early settlements of things like that, now there are some sort of things called as surcharges as well as rebates, right? So all these things has to be mentioned in that particular agreement. Of course, we can't say the rebates, we can't give exact idea about the rebates, but of course, when it comes to the APR, when it comes to the early settlement charges, surcharges and things like that, we can say, right? We can say, right, the total amount payable, right? And the amounts and timings of the repayments. Now, and when it comes to installment payments, you have to mention that in the installment payments, right? About the installment, how many installments are there? What is what is the highest lead time, right? What is the due date for the payment? Likewise, you have to tell all these things to your client, right? So creditor's role is further explained. Now the information has to be included a separate document named as a pre-contract information. Now prior the contract information, you should always reveal all this information to your debtor, right? So that is known as the that is titled as a pre-contract information, which will consist all this information, right? That includes all this information and also the copy of the signed agreement. Once you signed an agreement, that particular credit agreement's copy has to be given to the debtor. That is actually to communicate whatever the terms and conditions which are mentioned in that particular agreement, right? Let's say there are two options. Either you can, if you are the creditor, you can give that particular document to the let's say the debtor at the date of sign, right? At the date sign itself, you can give the copy to the debtor, or else it is the creditor's liability to give the letter within 7 days of the stipulation, right? Within the 7 days of, let's say there can be like one branch is signing the document on behalf of the branch manager will sign. Then after, another party has to be signed. Let's say in some cases there can be the company director, right? One director has to sign as the credit facility, like the granting the credit facility, right? For that, the document has to be sent to the head office of that particular organization. In that case, the debtor will sign that, the authorized officer will from the particular branch will sign that, but of course the director has not signed from the organization known as a creditor, right? So in that case, that has to be sent to the head office. So whenever the document has sent to the head office, it may take some time to come back to the particular branch, right? So in that case, you can practice the second option known as delivery within 7 days, right? But here I should mention that in this option, let's say the second option, you must be careful because there are ways like the consumers can ignore, or let's say consumers can cancel the agreements we will be discussing in this case, right? So in that case, whenever the date that you delivered that particular document will be taken into the consideration whenever you are going for the court of law, or taking the actions against the, or maybe still, you know, whenever it comes to the facility cancellation in partially or fully, that will be considered as, you know, as the date of realization. Realization in the sense the date that actually the debtor has received the letter, right? Okay. So cooling period, cooling off periods, right? What do you mean by cooling off? Now see the definition. A cooling off period is a period of a time following a purchase when the purchaser may choose to cancel a purchase. Be careful. And return goods which have been supplied for any reason and obtain a full refund. Now in an event where, let's take an example. One buyer comes to you, right? He pays you around, let's say, 1/3 of the total value of the agreement, right? Let's say the value of the agreement is 3 lakhs, and he will pay you he pays you around 1 lakh. So after that, the 2/3 of the agreement will be facilitated as a credit facility, right? So he owed 200,000 from you. So in that case, if he feels that it doesn't, like, let's say he has changed his mind, and after that he's asking to cancel the facility, right? Now the goods are with him, you have been received 1 lakh, and as a credit facility you have given 200,000, right? So now what is happening in the sense, whenever the buyer wants to cancel the agreement, he has to give a letter saying that I want the cancellation, right? That is what we call as the cooling off period, where the period which the let's say the credit, so the debtor can cancel the credit agreement, right? So for whatever reason, right? For whatever reason. And in that case, you will have to, let's say you are the creditor, you will have to, let's say, refund that money, let's say 100,000 to that particular debtor by receiving all his goods, whatever he has taken or he has bought, and as well as refunding or cancelling the total debt, let's say the facility, credit facility, and bringing everything back to the normal, right? That is why the cooling off periods are there, right? So we'll move further and get to know. In a circumstance, the debtor has to send the letter by post or an email. You know, when it comes to this by post sending letters, right? The letters which are sent by post is to see whenever it has reached to a legal consequence, right? When the matter has been taken in the courts of law, the realization rule is very much important, right? The date and the time that you receive the letter in actual, right? So that is why you use this letter by post, right? Be careful with that. Realization, or the postal rule, we call it as the postal rule, right? Or an email, because email automatically it has the date and the time, even for the you know, the last second you have the time there, right? So, or an email to the creditor mentioning all his cancellation rights to the agreements within 7 days. Now the normal cooling off period is 7 days from the date that he purchased the good, in the sense from the date that he came into that particular agreement, right? So that is why I said you that to be very careful with sending the documents to the debtor. The date that he received the agreement will be considered as the date of realization, or will be considered as the letter of the date of agreement, right? So let's say, as an example, if he bought the good on 1st of May 2020, right? He intends to cancel his agreement, and let's say there has been a delay, and after that after that the letters or the copy of the agreement has been sent to the debtor, let's say on 20th of May, right, which has almost like 20 days after the transaction, right? But that particular date will be considering as the date of agreement, so that even after 1st of June he can file a case. In the sense, he can ask for the cooling period facilities, like cooling off period facilities, in the sense he can cancel the agreement even after 34 days after the the cooling off period. Because why? His original receipt is 7 days, but other than that he is getting another 14 days time to cancel the agreements, right? So that is what, so that is why he is having 34 days, right? Fine. The effect of cancelling the credit agreement within the cooling off period is that the agreement and any linked transactions are treated as if they had never been entered into. I told you about in this neutral position, where once after you paid all your sums, whatever you received from the debtor, as well as you have received whatever the goods that are being bought by the the debtor, as well as you have cancelled the facility which is provided to the debtor. So everything is back to normal via cancelling all the credit agreements, right? And loan company must be return any funds received from the debtor and must return whatever the goods received from the creditor, right? Okay, so this is what I've explained. And withdraw from a credit agreement. How can you withdraw? Now let's say if you are a debtor, right, have taken let's say a credit facility from a creditor, right? So the debtor reserves the right to cancel the credit agreement within the 14 days of cooling period. I told you about this, right? At the moment when the consumer cancels the credit agreement, it is required to settle the sum granted under the credit facility in full, or to settle any due interest associated with the date of facility cancellation. Now remember, the reason is, whenever you are cancelling the agreements, right, you can cancel the total agreement. Let's say the sum has like 200,000 for 1 year. Let's say the 12 periods, 12 equal installment periods, and the interest or the APR or annual percentage rate is 10%. So altogether you have to pay 220,000 per year, right? So within 12 months period equally. So in that case, you don't want to pay, like let's say after 3 months you have asked to cancel the facilitation, right? Let's say after 14 days you have asked to cancel the facilitation. Up to that end, let's say there are 365 days, right? Out of 365 there are 14 days already almost spent, right? So for that particular dates you have to pay the interest and the total sum which you have granted under the loan, right? Basically whatever you have received under the loan, that particular principal amount and the interest which is calculated for only for 14 days has to be paid in cancellation of this credit facility, right? The cooling off period will be counted from the date that the debtor has signed and concluded, or the date which he received the copy of the agreement, as I told you, right? Especially for the credit cards, the cooling period starts from the date of the credit notification. Now without giving any credit, so that is why we are highly recommending the credit card companies to send their emails and notifications on time to the credit card holders. Otherwise it will be a sort of a discrimination, or it can be considered as an insult for the credit card holder, with immediate cessation of a credit card facility without any notification, right, or giving without giving the sufficient information, let's say the period of information, right? So because of that, it is compulsory to send the credit card notification on time to grant the cooling period, because that is the date that which starts the cooling period, the cooling off period, right? So we'll move further. The role of the credit reference agencies. What do you mean by a credit reference agencies? Now in Sri Lanka we call it as CRIB, Credit Information Bureau, but in UK there are some sort of some of credit reference agencies are available. So the role of the credit reference agency is to facilitate the creditors with the credit information of the debtors, the people those who have applied for getting the credits, right? Or let's say it can be a lease, it can be a loan, it can be a credit card, right? So for whatever reason, but they have applied, in a sense, once they have applied, it is the responsibility of the reference agencies. Of course, the creditor has to make a request to the reference agencies. Without requesting, reference agencies are not abide by the law to provide the information, right? In this case, the creditors has to anyway request the reference agencies to get the information. Then after that, reference agencies will look into the files of the debtors, or let's say the applicants. Then after that, those information will be provided to the creditor, in determining whether the loan to be granted or not, right? So based on the reference agency's information only, the creditor is going to decide on the grant of the loan or the facility, right? The creditors check the credit worthiness on or from these information which are received by the reference agencies, right? However, the debtors can also access to their credit files and to check their information through the credit reference. Now, let's suppose if you are going to apply for a loan from a creditor, if you have any doubt about the settlement, the early settlement of your, let's say a settlement of your earliest case or the previous loan, so if you have any doubt to see whether you are feasible or you are applicable or you are entitled to have a loan, let's say in some cases there can be some of the bad debts, or there can be non-performed debts, right? In that case, you are not going to be entitled for any other sort of loan receipt of any loan, right? So the financial institution won't give you the loans because if you have not settled the previous ones, right? So we call them those loans as the non-performed loans, right? We normally in trade we call them as the NP loans, right? So in that case, you can also check the files, right? By paying a small sum to the credit reference agencies, you can have access to the information and to see whether you have paid or not, right? And there are some popular credit reference agencies like Equifax and Experian and Call Credit are some of the credit reference agencies in UK. So they are having the information about your credit facilities, whatever the credit that you have granted in the previous cases, right? So accuracy of the credit information and revisal. Now this is very important, right? Because this deals with your basically on your credit worthiness as well as your personality, right? That affects on your personality as well, right? In some circumstances you may receive some of the information, or let's say in some circumstances the creditor will tell you you are not in a position to receive a loan, otherwise you have not paid your previous loan. In that case, you can access to the credit information, the credit reference agency, and you can get the access to your credit file and to see if you have the confidence to say that you have already paid over, and if you have the sufficient evidence to show them that you have paid over, maybe the letters like the facility cancellation letters and things like that. So you can process them with you and you can ask them to revise the information, because otherwise it is like misleading, some of information to mislead the other people on your credit worthiness, right? So anyway, you can now suppose that if you found that although you have paid your credit the loan, but still they appeared as to be paid in future, or let's say still you are considered as a bad debtor or NPL, non-performed loan, right? So you can ask the credit information center, or let's say the credit the information center, the agency, to revise your information by giving sufficient evidences to them, right? So under that case, if you have requested, it is the consumer credit agencies are very liable to you in order to process with a notification within 28 days of your letter or the notification, right? Let's say within 28 days they have to make an adjustment over your credit file or the credit information, otherwise after 28 days it will be the same, right? Because of that, within 28 days they have to make some arrangement either to remove your entry, right? Remove the entry of the which is like the misstatement, or let's say which gives the inaccurate information, as well as to amend that entry, or else to take no actions, right? If they are having sufficient evidences to prove that you have not paid the bills, then they can take no actions, right? Because there's nothing to revise, right? So these are the three things. But the Credit Information Agency is abide by the law to provide a sufficient statement to the debtor or the consumer within 28 days of the stipulation of the notification by the debtor, or let's say the consumer, right? So in early settlements, as I told you, there are some cases known as early settlements where consumer is able to settle their liabilities earlier than the actual time being, like the time duration, right? In that case, he's only able, or he or she is only liable for the amount that he has received or she has received in full, and also the proportionate interest payment due for the settlement date, right? And also the creditor. Now when it comes to third point, the consumer can ask the creditor for early settlement, thereby creditor must then provide debtor with a settlement statement within the 7 days of receiving, right? Now once the consumer or debtor has applied for early settlement, within 7 days the bank or the financial institution or the creditor has to give a settlement statement within 7 days of receiving, right? Receiving that particular letter. Okay, so what you can do, let's say if you are a debtor, so what are the remedies that you can do if the creditor is not responding to you, right? In an event where you have submitted a letter to early settle the bills, but of course if the creditor is not getting the actions and just ignoring your letter and wait, so what are the ways that you can take the actions against them or make the remedies? So there's one thing, right? So if the creditor is not facilitates you to settle the bill or settle the liability in full earlier, so you can warn them saying that you can have the service of the Financial Ombudsman of the UK, and it's basically a discrimination of your basic right of consumer early settlement of consumer credits, right? On that case, you can expect the Financial Ombudsman service, and you can warn the company to give an immediate action on your early settlement letter or the request, right? So this is what you can do. And protections over the credit card purchases and special provisions. Now there are so many things that they have taken, like some of the actions which are or the provisions made by this act on the credit card purchases, especially under the section 75, the Consumer Credit Tax provides the additional protection for the credit card purchases costing between 100 GBP to 30,000 GBP, as I told you earlier. And as well as a transaction costs more than 30,000, the protection under the section 75 will not be applied, right? So these are the special provisions which are made by the Consumers Credit Act. When it comes to now in the whenever I was starting the lesson, I told you about we are going to discuss about the Consumer Credit and Consumer Protections Act, right? So when it comes to the Consumer Protection Act, we can see that has been established in 1987 under the Parliament of UK, and then gives the right to claim the compensation against the producer of a defective product if it has caused to a damage, death or personal injury. Now this is to totally protect the consumer from whatever the product he has bought from the market, right? Let's see how. Now in an event where the defective product, right, it can be a technically defective, it can be internally, or it can be defective in any ways, right? When it comes to that, of course you can consider about the merchantable product principle as well, right? If it's a defective product and if it has caused to a damage or a death or a personal injury, so that can be the let's say the plaintiff, or let's say the affected party, or let's say the innocent party can sue for the damages under the provisions made by the Consumers Protections Act, right? So Act contains a strict liability test for defective products in UK law, making the producer of that product automatically liable for any damage caused, right? So for any damage caused by using that particular product is coming under the liability of that particular producer, right? C, the innocent party, affected party for the damage. According to the section 2.1 of the Consumer Protection Act of UK, Consumer Protection Act damage is established when there has been any damage. It can be any damage, right? It's under the section 2.1 the Consumer Protection Act, right? Any damage. It can be a personal loss, injury, health damage, personality damage, whatever, right? So it can be any damage. Any who suffers the damage as a result of the defect is entitled to claim, and not just whoever bought the product. Now, as an example, let's say a machinery has been bought by a company's chairman or the managing director and deployed it in somewhere in one of their plants in a company, right? One of the worker has been affected with a damage. Let's say that person has been damaged as an act of this machinery, right? So as a result of that, the person will be disabled, right? In that case, the company, or let's say basically the worker himself even can claim for the damages from the company which the machine is manufactured, right? Because even though the company has bought it, but the person who actually suffers the damage is another worker, right? So the worker is entitled to get the damages from the manufacturer itself, right? So damages which cannot claim, there are some damages which cannot claim, right? And there are some exclusions which are provided by the act itself. So what are the exclusions? Basically the loss or damage to the product itself, you cannot claim them. Let's suppose that if the product has knocked somewhere, let's say if it's a refrigerator, the refrigerator had knocked with the wall, so you cannot ask the claim from, you cannot claim the damages from the manufacturer, right? It's an exclusion, right? And also that is why in some cases I have seen most of the mobile phones and mobile devices, they say whatsoever the defects which are happening through falling down of this device will not be accounted as the damage, right? They won't be, that is why you are receiving a warranty as well, right? So if you are having a company guarantee or a warranty, right, you cannot claim the warranty on the grounds where you have fallen that particular device into the, let's say by mistakenly, you can, mistakenly your particular device will be fallen down, right? So in that case you cannot ask the damages because it's a, it's lost or damage to the product itself. No, it's not the damage or a loss for somebody else, a person or a thing or a let's say another party, right? Simply. And damage to the business products not ordinarily intended for private use. Damaged to the business products not ordinarily intended to the private use are not being considered as, that will be like exclusions. And also damage to the property with a value below GBP 275, so which is a less value. So because of that, they are not going to claim under the Act of Consumer Protections. So those will be considered as the exclusions by the Act. And also in any case, now most of the lawyers are trying, or the legal attorneys are trying to exempt their producers in an event where they are asked to they are met with the complaints of claiming the damages, right? They use some of the exemptions by using these points. So what are these points? The producer didn't sell or supply the product. As an example, let's say if the only version of that product had been stolen and had never been intended for public sale. Now in some cases of samples, they can say not tried out samples, those should be the samples which have been kept with them and has not been published, or let's say has not been released for the public use, right? In that case they can claim that. Of course the product wasn't defective when the producer supplied it, right? In that event there's an argument saying that the product was in a merchantable quality and it was in a usable quality when the product was sold to the consumer, right? That is another point. Third one is at the time of the production, the level of the scientific and technological knowledge wasn't advanced enough to have known about the defect in the product. Even though the defect was existed, the product, the technology or the let's say the scientific knowledge of that particular firm was not, or particular firm, not the particular firm, should be the particular country or particular territory, or let's say in the world, was not sufficient enough to get to know about this defect, right? So it's like ignoring the liability again, right? The defect is present because of the need to comply with the legal requirements. Now, intentionally made technical errors, right? We can see in claiming some of the damages for the vehicles and all. We can see some of the people are trying to get the insurance by making some shorted electrical shocks in the vehicles and things like that. So you can see, right? So those are like, the defect is presented based on having a claim, right? Basically to get a claim, right? So that is what you mean. And the product wasn't the operative cause of damage or personal injury. The product wasn't the operative cause of the damage or personal injury. Now these are the claims, these are the ways that they try to exempt some of the cases. Right, so whenever they're making the claims, you must be careful, because there are ways to making the claims. How can you make the claims? Affected party cannot make any claim under the Consumer Protection Act more than 3 years from the date that became aware of the damage. After 3 years of the damage, at the point where you got to know about this damage, you cannot claim the damages from the it can be the seller, it can be the party who sued over, right? And also no claim can be brought more than 10 years after the date the product was last put into the circulation, right? Fine. In an event when a brand is exclusively made for supermarkets, now especially when there are, that is why I included here, especially there are some products which are tailor-made for that particular supermarket, right? So if something has gone wrong, of course the affected party can claim over the producer of that particular product plus the supermarket as well, because it was strictly made to that particular supermarket and that was available from there only, and that particular product was manufactured by that particular supplier. So because of that, the two parties are liable for the damages, right? The proportions, or let's say the pro rata, will be determined by the court of law, but of course that is the liability of both the producer and the supermarketeer to provide the damages to the, or compensate the damages to the plaintiff, right? And here, according to the Consumer Protections Act, it defines about the producer and the product. Now, who's a producer? Any person or a company who, by putting their name on the product or using a trademark or other distinguished mark, has held themselves up to be the producer of the product, or any person or a company who has imported the product into the European Union, because these are, the European, or let's say these are UK laws, right? So that is why they are referring to the European Union. From a place outside the EU, that is also European Union, in order to sell it on, right? So that particular the party is known as a producer, and the product is almost anything that can be packaged and sold. Now, except the buildings, except the lands, everything will be considered as a product, right? Because if it's a bare land, if it's a building, so those cannot be taken as a product, because it's a composition, or it's a combination of so many products, right? Let's say bricks, GI pipes, whatever let's say the faucets, right? Or it can be the cements. Those can be considered as the products, right? But building is made of all these materials, so because of that, the building is not a product, right? So be careful, right? Then defects which can affected party can claim. So in considering whatever the defects which a party can claim, the court of law will consider about these criteria. So the criteria is how has the product has been marketed, things like packaging, the use of mark, any warnings on the product, If you can remember, we discussed about the notification to the ignorant buyer about the particular damages which can happen, right? So these are like any warnings on the products that instructions will be taken into the account, right? Now, as an example, when the wood cutter is operated, there's a sufficient, or let's say there's a possibility of happening some of the accidents to the fingers of the carpenter, right? Because of that, they have to warn on that, to saying that restrain, let's say to refrain from removing the woodcutter's guard, right? Or let's say in some cases they can ask the carpenters to wear the goggles for their eyes, right, to get the protections, right? Otherwise some of the small chips of what you call the wood can be placed on their eyes, and some of the damages can happen, right? It is up to the manufacturer to aware the ignorant buyer, because ignorant buyer in the sense he doesn't have the sufficient knowledge about these things, right? So that is the presumption that we make. In that case, you have to, if you are the manufacturer, you have to tell that to the buyer, right? If it was not there, so that will be considered as ignoring your liability, right? Ignoring the liability of the manufacturer, right? Were there warning labels or instructions provided with the product, right? See what are the areas that they look into, and how would the product reasonably be expected to be used, right? If the use was taken, now as an example, let's say if somebody, now you can see some of the videos which are published in some of the various websites. Some of the people are using the drill machines as the beaters, right? So that is not the use that you can take from it. That is an alternative use, of course, since it is circulating. But of course you cannot use the what do you call, the drill machine as the hand beater of your kitchen, right? It's basically where you lose the personal responsibility and the product reasonability, right? So product is reasonably made in order to drill the walls, right, not to beat the eggs. So be careful with that, right? And would any have reasonably expected to safety of the product to have the deteriorated after a period of a time? So these are the things that they will consider on defining or identifying the claims which are possible on the affected parties, right? So these are the things that I've decided to discuss today. So thank you very much. Hope you have enjoyed the session. Thank you.